Well, hi everyone. I'm Jennifer Allen. I live just outside Portland, Oregon, in a town called Milwaukee. I'm a program officer and I'm director of learning and community engagement for the James F. and Marion L. Miller Foundation, which primarily supports arts and K-12 education throughout the state. Miller Foundation has always supported rural Oregon since its inception. Because we have a statewide mission, we have to support rural orgs in order to realize our vision for the state. Is really, we're just a small staff foundation and Oregon is a really big state. Let's get out to to the rural areas and state. Let's develop relationships there, learn about those communities so that we can evaluate how our funding programs fit or don't fit with the needs of those communities.
Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Gabriela, and I am the Hudson Valley Program Coordinator here at North Star Fund. And what brings me to the work is my experience working with farm workers and children of farm workers in upstate New York, in the Hudson Valley and Western New York for many years, and also my personal experience of having been undocumented and doing a lot of organizing around immigrant rights. And I'm very happy now to be at North Star Fund and think about grant making in the Hudson Valley. Organizing in the Hudson Valley and in rural settings looks very different than organizing in New York City. And so we wanted to be a champion of that work. We wanted to support that work. And there's a huge track record in the Hudson Valley of a lot of different groups being able to build a strong base of community members that understand their power and their voice in this like political world that we live in, and understand how they can use that voice to bring about change. And that is only able to happen because we have a lot of nonprofit organizations who are throwing themselves into, political education, into leadership development, into building community, even though it's very isolating. There's no infrastructure to build the leadership of new leaders to the extent that we would like to. And part of that is lack of funding, right? And the lack of funding is due to the fact that many foundations don't really understand how community organizing looks in rural areas, and it looks differently.
I'm Meg O'Connell, so the executive director of the Allen Family Foundation, which is a place-based foundation in central New York. We focus on two counties, Onondaga and Cayuga County. So we've been around for 65 plus years. The hardest challenge is as a funder in rural communities is really that you don't have the infrastructure that you have in more urban settings. You really just don't have the not-for-profits. You don't have the sophistication of not-for-profits. You have really all the challenges related to just a scattered people, scattered organizations, and it's just geographically very challenging to serve. You do the work very differently in rural communities than you do in urban communities.
Hello, everyone, wherever you may be. Happy to be here with you. My name is Jaime Arredondo. You see him pronouns, and I'm an immigrant from the state of Michoacan, Mexico. And I've been living in this country in Oregon for 31 years now. So I've seen a lot of change in those 3 decades. I work for an organization called the Capaces Leadership Institute, which I've been involved with most of my life. We work primarily in rural communities of the Oregon's Mid-Willamette region, which is very, very agriculture, but has changed a lot in terms of demographics over the last, several decades. Many funders, both family foundations, large foundations, that have begun to kind of recognize, the important work of rural organizations and centering, equity in that work. But there's a lot of work to be done still, absolutely.
The power of that connection and introductions is really great to bridge that divide that Jaime talked about, which is the community with needs and solutions, and the in philanthropy we have the assets to help support those solutions, and we can help make those connections too in philanthropy.
Any of the work that we do in rural areas is very much in partnership, even more so than in the city, with our public partners, partly because they have the most access to resources in these communities. And our goal has always been to get them to think a little bit more innovatively, more equitably, more inclusively, and to just kind of think outside the box. It's much more of a challenge, let's just say that, to further the racial equity in some of the rural communities that we work at. And yet, I think that that is one of the things as a foundation that is predominantly white. It's a family that has that ability because of the power and influence that we have had for many generations, that we feel really called to be able to do that work. If we're not going to do that work and call out that work, then it's not going to be a safe space for other people to be able to do that. So as a funder in those areas of elevating and bringing out these conversations, you have to do it publicly, but then you also have to do it privately.
The way we talked about our grant making and the kinds of programs we supported, the language didn't necessarily resonate with rural communities or rural organizations. They might read a description of our grant making program and not recognize their work in that.
I would say go to community,
Literally showing up in town and just sitting down and listening.
being a part of our work, coming to our spaces, or in this case, virtual, I guess, but also, telling the story to others as well. You can advocate, for your communities, so that there's a greater impact being made. And
We have a committee in New York City and also the Hudson Valley that inform our grant making, strategy, that inform which groups should we be funding and why. And they really are rooted into what is community organizing and are often always given a voice on how it looks in rural communities. And so we follow their lead and their recommendations, and it's a really awesome part of what we do.
In rural communities is also really understand what's going on in rural communities. The easiest thing is just to put up a grant application and have people apply, right? And I think that that can be impactful. But I think if you want to be even more impactful, it really is going to the community and to try and really find out what's going on in a community and what their perceived needs are.
I think, this is a gut check moment for all of us, in philanthropy, that, we need to continue to let go, that we need to continue to trust community. We need to continue to be comfortable with uncertainty. And I know it's hard, it's hard. At the end of the day, community knows what's best for them. They have the answers to their problems, to the opportunities, and, how do we shift as much as possible to follow that lead.
Rural strategies, more than any other, really will benefit from funders taking on trust-based practices. Jaime said, I think his language was sort of, okay, funders, you have to let go, and you really have to trust that rural communities have the solutions.
In the fact that organizing looks different in rural communities, and how then are we going to be flexible enough to believe in the overall vision that these groups might have for a particular region, and really throw ourselves into supporting them and listening.
What speaks the most is like, where is your money going to, what does that look like for you at the end of your year, right? How many are rural organizations? How many are organizations that are centered in equity, that are working, intersectionally with other groups, right, that are being affected? That's going to speak the most, not the fact that you have, you need to support work, you have in your mission statement, or, in your values, that you need to support rural communities, and money speaks.
Money speaks. We didn't spend a lot of time developing a rural strategy, developing a narrative around why and what we were going to do. We really just think that our values live in our practices and in our funding.
And instead of asking groups to change, why don't we look at ourselves and see how we can be more flexible, have more of a transparent process, and really just a participatory process that we're involved with.
There's that motto: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. And I see that more in rural communities than ever. It takes a long time for people, and you have to just have the long-term horizon, but you have to keep chipping away at it and keep bringing people along.
It doesn't have to be very dreamy. These are things that we can actually change in the philanthropic sector to support grassroots organizations to bring about change.